Okay, so we are live on Facebook and YouTube. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. We're at 5 to 1 on a Tuesday, and we're fortunately to catch a legal conveyancer, Jazz Dallywell. Thank you for joining us, Jazz,
Thank you.
in your lunch hour break, if you have a break in today's world.
Yeah.
And Mitesh, every day's a lunch break for you. Every hour's a lunch break, eh?
It is, yes.
Good man. No, thank you for joining me, and thanks for doing your hair and makeup, Mitesh. Okay, good. So, for those of you that don't know who we are, my name's Akhil from our mortgage broker. I am the MD of the company, and we specialize in all things mortgages and property finance here in the UK. I'm joined by my colleague, who's a specialist mortgage broker, Mitesh, and one of our key contacts at Taylor Rose and a legal conveyancer, Jazz Dallywell. Jazz, please introduce yourself to our viewers.
Yeah, hi everyone. Thanks for having me. So I'm Jazz. I work for Taylor Rose Solicitors. Actually work as a consultant. Have been doing it for a number of years, exclusively on the residential side. So your standard vanilla style kind of transactions, be it freehold, leasehold, remortgages, transfers between individuals and limited company. That's kind of what I specialize in.
Perfect, thank you. And Mitesh, what's your specialities?
Um, I think a bit of a jack of all trades, so I could look at anything that is around self-employed directors looking for a residential mortgage, to portfolio landlords looking to buy something more quirky in a complex structure, all the way to bridging commercial. Um, so yeah, and development finance. So I have vast knowledge in these areas because we get pick up lots of different types of inquiries every single day. So yeah, I'm quite lucky that I can obviously service those clients depending on different types of needs they have.
Perfect, and thank you for that. So, just a brief, headlines from who are our mortgage brokers. So, as Mitesh quite rightly said, we're a specialist mortgage brokerage. We're directly authorised by the FCA, and we have a wide range of lenders that we have access to. So, whether you are a first-time buyer, a buy-to-let portfolio landlord, or even a commercial investor, please do think of our mortgage broker for a free and no obligation advice. Now, what we wanted to do on this conversation, and like we all have in the past on our YouTube videos and on our Facebook Lives, is to have a genuine conversation about today's world, all things property, and the concept of purchasing and selling properties here in the UK. And as I said, we're joined by Jazz Dallywell from Taylor Rose. So to talk about the aftermath of a mortgage offer. So you can see by the tag there, I wrote life after the mortgage offer has been issued, and it certainly is another life, right, Jazz? Because I should say Mitesh first. There's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears that go into obtaining a mortgage offer. Some are very quick, some are very slow. We're not going to point any blames to anybody. However, we are in the business of supporting our clients in finding them the most suitable mortgage. But certainly there is a life after a mortgage offer. It doesn't mean you're going to get the keys and you live happily ever after. You're then going to, meet and meet up with Jazz perhaps to go through the legalities of the mortgage offer. And Jazz, tell us a bit about what happens when you receive that mortgage offer from the lender, if it is, for example, a purchase transaction. Tell us just a quick synopsis of what the process looks like.
So I guess it kind of depends where the mortgage offer arrives. If it arrives at the initial stages, I would have hoped I would have got the office copies, the whole contract pack on the other side. By then I would have reviewed everything. So anything that the mortgage offer crops up, and sometimes it comes up with special conditions, there's a side single extension. Did you know about it? Is there consents already available? So I would have identified all that in the local search, the contract pack. So that's all good to go. But sometimes I actually get the mortgage offer very early on, and I suppose it takes me by surprise, some of the conditions. Some of them say, we want a hold retention of £5,000, for example. And I'm like, what? I haven't even reviewed anything. So it is a lot of work, a lot of stages. I don't even think I could fulfill them in the 45 minutes that we possibly do have, because it doesn't even take me probably even 45 minutes to even read the document, to be honest.
Right.
So let alone trying to say it all. But there are a lot of key stages. For example, I would have started off with reviewing the contract pack, reviewing the local searches, reviewing the mortgage offer, and then after that, obviously, then reporting to the client and making sure they don't have any further inquiries raised with those reports that we're attending to with them.
Okay. And do you find when you receive a mortgage offer document from, let's just say, for example, Barclays, and for example, a specialist lender like Precise, do you find the mortgage offer and their conditions are very similar, or is it two different ball games in terms of your process and your due diligence?
No, I think the conditions are more about the property rather than the lender, to be honest.
Okay.
So that's how I've kind of like worked my way through it. So obviously, if a property is more complex, I'm going to see more conditions on that. For example, like I attended to a recent leasehold where there was subject to Section 20 works, and the fact that it's subject to Section 20 works, it kind of means that they want to hold a retention of a certain amount towards the building cost of that property. I think that would have been with any lender, whether it had been Barclays or a niche lender, to be honest. Just because I guess it depends on each valuer, I suppose, isn't it?
Yeah.
Rather than lender.
Thank you for that. So Mitesh, as mortgage brokers, we are blessed to have a wide range of lenders that we have access to, which is great. But sometimes we're oversupplied with mortgage options. Now, from a client's perspective, a lot of clients want to save money. They want the best rates. They want all the freebies that go along with it. Free legal cover, free valuation, a bit of cash back, and all that sort of stuff. So tell me a bit about how you navigate and meet your clients' expectations, particularly around, a lot of products out there are free legals. What's your take on lenders providing free legals, cashback options, or clients paying for their legals? What's the upside? What's the downside? Give us a bit more flavor around that, please.
I think, Akhil, because I've been around for almost 17 years.
You don't even look over 18, Mitesh.
In this line of business. So I have come across different scenarios and have seen where things go wrong. So what I tend to do is I look at the overall client's experience, and then when I'm engaging with the client at the outset, when we're discussing deals, I provide those options, and the clients are very much aware, especially the clients that I deal with normally already have a property they've owned before, so they do understand having a good relationship with a reputable company and a good convincing solicitor, purely from a point of communication. And the reason why I say communication is because it really boils down to that
Yeah.
in a nutshell. So what I normally find with the free legal options, and I have two cases right now, they're very simple remortgage transactions, and they're with high street lenders. And what I found was that probably towards the end of the transaction, towards completion, there's been a lack of communication, and sometimes the managers that we got access to can't resolve it, and it's almost like you got 4 or 5 people dealing with the same inquiry because of the lack of power or authority to be able to resolve the problem. So what I've then found is that if you go down the cashback option, which is normally what I tend to do with some of my clients, where let's say if the transaction is costing £750 for conveyancing overall, then my client could pick up a cashback deal of 250 or 500, and that would go towards a cost for the conveyancer, whoever that may be. So obviously, from a cost perspective, it helps the client, but at the same time, I'm looking at the overall process and also the time to completion. Because remember, these clients are remortgaging or doing a transaction, especially in this today's market, is you want to try and lock in those rates quite quickly before they go up. So if you think about logically, if you're going to then delay a transaction and if your offer runs up because of delays in conveyancing, then you obviously have a bigger problem in your hands because you'll have to renew your deal. And so when you look at the bigger picture, and I discuss this with my clients, 99% of the time, they will go down the route of having an external conveyancer rather than taking a free legal option from that's provided by the lender. So that's my experience over the 17 years, and I say 17 is because obviously I have to compile the type of transactions I've dealt with and look at the experiences my clients have had over a period of time, because I can't judge a lender or a space of 1 to 6 months or so, because obviously lenders are evolving the market, improving their processes, but it's been a general trend, and so that's the reason why my preferred option would be that. However, having said all that, it boils down to the client's choice. So if the client prefers to have the free legal option, or sometimes you don't have a cashback option. So the
Yeah.
client sometimes has to go down the route, and so it means more work for us. It's not a big issue. Don't be scared. It's not like things will go horribly wrong if we don't fix it. It just means I then have to spend more time on that case.
Okay. Janice, what's your take on free legals versus cashback versus client pays for their own legal fees? Have you got some words of wisdom or some
Um,
horror stories?
I haven't personally, I guess, experienced it, I suppose, but from what I hear from people, I suppose the bottom thing is what Mitesh is saying is the transaction takes a long, long time with these freebies, to be honest. I think it's just because there's such a team and there's like one person picks up and then the other person picks up stage two. Whereas if you've got an external one, you've got one solicitor who's going to do all the stages 1 to 10, who's going to pick up all the emails, and there is like a faster response time, like that 48-hour period.
Yeah.
Whereas I think with anyone that's on these like free ones that are included in the mortgage offer, telephone calls, I'm not too sure. I mean, I think there's like some kind of like call center or something, isn't it? And then there's like a whole load of people behind that who aren't even sure, because by the time they've updated the system and someone's answered the call, it's a whole different conversation to what you've had with your solicitor probably just an hour ago, to be honest. I don't favour them, but some do, and I guess it's just kind of like a financing timing thing.
Perfect. Thank you. So, yeah, no, thank you guys for that. My 2 pence would be very, very simple. It boils down to communication, the speed of the transaction that it needs to take, and also the experience of the conveyancer that's doing the transaction. Now, if you're buying something at auction, it needs to be done in 56 days. You've got to make sure that the conveyancing firm is going to throw the kitchen sink at your case because time is of the essence. You've got to ensure, the conveyancer has the relevant experience to carry out the due diligence and the legal work for your particular case in question. And that's where, when the free legals come into play, usually it's run-of-the-mill conveyancers that will just do box standard remortgages and purchases. So, for those viewers out there that are, looking for good conveyancers, key questions I would say to ask your broker and ask the conveyancer is, have you done a transaction like this in the past? Do you have time? And are you going away in the next 4 weeks on holiday? Because if they are going away, who's going to be your next case handler? And as Jazz, did mention, are you going to get the gatekeeper at the reception desk and say, okay, we'll get the conveyancer to call you back? So, key thing is point of contact, relationship, speed, and experience. So, from my side, they're the sort of headlines. But I think Mitesh and Jazz, you mentioned those as well. So, thank you so much for that. So, with regards to the brokerage side, Mitesh, what's usually the lender requirement for a particular transaction? For example, a buy-to-let and a limited company. What's the particular criteria? Can a client appoint any solicitor, or is there some parameters around that?
It's a very good question, Akhil, because buy-to-let transactions, limited company name, it's more like the flavor of the last 18 months, 2 years that we've seen as a practice. I would say 80% of my business is basically those transactions. So what I have found is that every lender's got a different requirement. However, majority of lenders will require at least 3 practicing partners in the law firm. Maybe Jazz can expand on what that actually means from the point of view of qualifications and the difference in kind of the role between the conveyancer and the partner in the law firm, for example. So I think that's one area to look out for. One of the other things that lenders look out for sometimes is a criteria called CQS certification. So that's the convincing quality scheme. That's another area to look out for. And sometimes lenders have a closed panel. So that means that certain solicitors cannot maybe act, and maybe you may end up having 2 solicitors acting on the case. So it can get quite depending on the type of transaction you're doing, depending on the lender as well. So it's very important that, especially with a buy-to-let transaction limited company name, as a broker, I always plant the seed at the outset about making sure that the client is thought of or have decided on which law firm they're going to be using for conveyancing. Sometimes the deal actually can fall through because the cost could be too much. I haven't even touched on independent legal advice, which is another subject on its own. So there's so much cost that can be involved in a transition like that, not even thinking about stamp duty and so on. So if you, we're a broker, so we don't really get too involved in that side of the transaction. So I'm not going to go and start getting quotes on everything. Obviously, I'll refer the client onto the contacts we have, and the solicitors will deal with the clients directly. But that is just a few areas to consider, let alone the fact that the transaction itself it's complex, which means you do need an experienced conveyancer in the transaction. So you can see the areas I've just mentioned. It isn't that straightforward, which is why it's a conversation I bring at the forefront of the meeting.
Perfect. Thank you for that. And yeah, another top tip is, not every single solicitor firm is on every lender's panel. Some lenders have a restricted panel depending on the type of product. So it's good that, for those of you that are looking to use the solicitor that you used for your first home you purchased 20 years ago, they might not fit the bill for the new lender. But again, the likes of, Mitesh will guide you accordingly to say whether that solicitor is fit for the purpose of the new transaction with the lender. Jazz, what's your take on that side as well? Is it it's key, right, that you use the right solicitor firm for the right transaction? What types of transactions do you typically get involved in your capacity at Taylor Rose?
So it would be all the limited and individual kind of transactions.
Right.
Of course, it is important to remember that we're not on all lender panels. Some solicitors out there are probably not on some of the lender panels we are on. I think that's just more of a risk management. You'll find that anyone that has like a sole trader, they have probably a small number of panels, whereas a big law firm with so many more directors, so many more approved SRA managers, they're going to have a longer list than a standard law firm. I think that's just a risk management really from SRA, just to make sure they have qualified and experienced solicitors behind them. Taylor Rose, we have so many offices across the country, from north, south, east, west basically, but each office has its own lender panel as well. So you could have just thought about, okay, look, Taylor Rose in London is going to have the same panel as Taylor Rose up north in Liverpool, for example, because it's going to be different bodies, different people manage at each office. I wouldn't recommend. I have some clients that come to me and say, Jazz, I want you as a solicitor and I'll appoint someone else for the lender, just because I'm not on the panel. But there, the clients will pay double the cost. Like, why would you want to do that? But I think it's more the service they're probably after. But I wouldn't still recommend that just because I might provide service. What about the other law firm that's going to then be acting for the lender? I'd rather they just had one solicitor, straightforward transaction, and hopefully their service is just as good, to be honest.
Perfect. Thank you for that, Jazz. Jazz, we're going to wrap up in about 5 or 6 minutes. So for those viewers, if anybody's got any questions out there on Facebook, pop them into the comments box. Hopefully you can hear me. Maybe I should have said that in the first minute. Hopefully they've listened to us in the last 18, but I'm sure sound is fine. But if anybody has any questions for Jazz with regards to anything legal conveyancing, pop them in the comments box, and I'll do my best to have them answered. And likewise, if you've got any mortgage questions, Mitesh is available for your questions. For those of you that are watching this back on a pre-recorded on all the socials, feel free to email Mitesh directly for any mortgage inquiries, and Jazz likewise at Taylor Rose with any conveyancing inquiries that you may have. Jazz, tips. I always like to ask property professionals for any tips that you could give. So give us a tip for somebody that's purchasing a property, and likewise someone that's going to remortgage a property tomorrow.
Yeah, so on a purchase, I think we're pretty much in the seller's market. So what normally happens is you're getting gazumped a lot of times. I've had transactions fall through because the seller's probably got a higher offer or whatever the case, and my clients now have to fork out on fees.
Yeah.
So there's something called out there, home buyers protection insurance. So if you Google that, home buyers protection insurance, that would cover your legal fees, your valuer's fees, your broker's fees, your surveyor's fees, in the event, the transaction does fall through. It will cost obviously a little bit more, but at least it's worth having at the end run. You've got that policy in place and you can claim against it.
And do you arrange that policy to put in place, or do they?
It's actually through a separate product, really. I don't know who it's by, to be honest, but if someone Googled it, it's kind of like they have their own kind of like shop, supposed to speak, like how insurance policies are, really.
Perfect.
And
remortgaging tips?
He said, remortgage on a buy-to-let, I would just make sure that the client has all the documents in place. If they have all the documents in place quicker and faster, I can speed up through the transaction faster as well, so I'm not really holding on any documents. Yeah. So if it is like a buy-to-let, I'd expect a tenancy agreement in place, deposit certificate, in-date EPC, building insurance, and if we've done any recent works to the property, then have that in place as well. I mean, the more documents you give me, the better. I mean, that's just me in a nutshell, really. But at least if I have that in place, I'm not going to ask you any questions, and I'm just going to say, okay, here's the report. Just make sure you understand everything here, and let's sign here. I don't need to request any documents from you, really. That's, I think, that's what the play is.
And is it was there any additional documents other than what the lender would request, or would request that you carry out and review? What additional documents would you request from the client outside the lender's scope?
Those would be our standard documents, to be honest.
Okay.
Whatever the lender wants, we want. I guess we're in the hands of the lender anyway.
Right,
so
okay.
It's not anything specific. It's just more about the property and the transaction that you're kind of like dealing with. If it's a buy-to-let, I want to see all those like recent tenancy agreements, etc., that would come into play.
Perfect. And there's a great word that's bounded around to speed up the transaction. It's called indemnity policies.
Oh yeah.
Let's tell everyone what's an indemnity policy and when and why can you use it in a transaction.
Okay, so the only places I've ever used an indemnity policy is where it's a cash purchase and the client wants a quick turnaround. He's seen the property, he's not too bothered about the searches. I would carry out an indemnity policy. Indemnity policy would pretty much cover the value of the property slightly higher, just to ensure, like, if there's any faults or anything that's come across with the property, then you can claim against that policy. The other time you'd only ever get an indemnity policy is if it's on a remortgage as well. You'd never get it with a purchase with a lender. I'm yet to come across that, to be honest, if there is one out there.
Perfect. Thank you for that. Mitesh, anything you want to add to Cat on the back of what Jazz has just mentioned the last 2 minutes?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I've come across, so 2 recent transactions. One was a complex transaction which involved bridge finance, and the other one was a transaction that Jazz was involved in. And this idea of indemnity insurance came in, but at the same time, there's other areas that propped up. And so I did a bit of investigation to find out kind of what was happening in the background. So what I would say to clients is that if you've done some works in the property, then make sure that whatever websites that obviously Jazz looks at, those are the local council where it's all registered, it's all updated properly, because that could be, again, an area that causes a lot of problems, and I'm sure Jazz can also touch on that. And also at the same time, if you've recently purchased a property and there's a backlog of properties being registered under your name with the land registry, just to double check those areas, because I've had a case recently where for 4 months the client's property wasn't registered, and because we're doing a remortgage of the bridge, it just delayed the process slightly. It just meant myself and 5 other people getting involved in order for that to be to be done quicker. Again, I kept on mentioning the fact that it just means we having to spend more time, because ultimately the client will come to us and say, I'm stuck, please help. And so obviously we will do that. But obviously when you get involved in transactions like that, you tend to realize that obviously there's a problem out there in the market. And this is 2 areas that I've come across a lot in the last 6 months.
Yeah.
So it could be there's a backlog, in registering properties or however the transaction's been done. I don't, Jazz maybe can share some light into whether she's come across areas like that. But just from my perspective, from what I'm hearing from my clients, and where I've got involved and spent extra time on areas that technically brokers don't normally get involved, because it requires different solicitors and different departments, whether it's the land registry or or speaking to the council just to get things sorted out. It's probably two areas that I would say should be mindful of.
Yeah, and it probably goes back to relationships, right? So if many clients ask us for reputable solicitors that we know and we work well with, and it's key. We refer to people that we know, like, and trust, and are going to get the job done in the right manner, including in a timely manner as well. So yeah, no, I certainly agree, and caveat, I echo exactly what you just said. Jazz, anything you want to add from the back of Mitesh's chitter
Yeah,
chat?
no, I completely agree with you both. I mean, if the client's going to suggest that there are kind of like extensions done to the property, or the valuer is going to indicate that there are extensions, just make sure you have the proper documents in place. And
Yeah.
if you can't get them from the local council. You'll probably get it faster than I will, to be honest. My emails don't really reach that far to them.
Sounds good. Good. Any tips? Any last words you want to leave with us, Jazz?
Make sure you have a good power team. I always say that to clients, just because if you're going to invest that much in a property, invest that much on your power team. So what I mean by power team is make sure you have a good broker in place, make sure you have a good surveyor in place. Those kind of contacts really do help. And then if you are building a portfolio, you're always going to go back to those people, and those people already have your documents in place. So
Yeah.
don't try and shop around too much. One transaction after the other. It's always good to have like one point of call, to be honest, and maintain that relationship.
Yes, and I always say that the first transaction is always the hardest, right? So Mitesh might send you a long shopping list, and I'm not talking Sainsbury's, I'm talking mortgage requirement lists. But it's for the good of the transaction, right? So it's to help speed it up. We have all the information on day one, and the beauty is, Mitesh, you probably agree that we know what lenders want, we know what lenders need, because this is what we do for a day job. And I always say to our clients, let us do what we do best. You do what you do best. You're a portfolio landlord. Find that right investment. Do your DD on the property. It's cash flow well. It yields well. And then in turn, what we will do, we're your finance partners, and we're going to find the most competitive, but more importantly, the right deal for you first time. And that's key, the first time, because a lot of transactions are taking some time. We've got lenders, I won't mention any names, but there's a lot of lenders at the moment that are taking 12, 15, 18 days to review an initial application, which is actually frightening, because there is no stamp duty incentives going on. So it's good because it shows that the market is still very vibrant, which I certainly agree. And we are very, very busy, and so are you, Jazz. But here is just understanding that if you don't get the information right first time in a timely manner to the lender, you'll just go back in the queue again, and you'll have to start again. And that's another benefit. I know it's a very cheeky plug, but that's the benefit of using an independent, but more importantly, an experienced broker like Mitesh, that can influence the lender, influence you, and make sure you have the right documents. Mitesh, any last words from your side, sir?
I think you touched on it briefly about being prepared.
Yeah.
But I'll just say, and I think I've done this in other videos recently, that be mindful of what's happening with the Bank of England base rate.
Yeah.
Don't take it very lightly. So if I keep on saying time and time again to review those deals 6 months in advance before expiry, there's a reason why I'm doing that. I'm not stupid that I keep on mentioning the same thing 10 times. Is because I've got a fear that by the next 6 months, that the Bank of England base rates could potentially even double or be higher. And if that is the case, then you don't want to lose out on the current deals on the market, especially with locking deals on a 5-year fixed rate. So I'll leave it at that. But just be mindful of your portfolio, expiry dates. Is it worth breaking? Is it worth doing something now rather than leaving it for another 6 months?
No, thank you. And yes, 100% do that. So whether you've got your main residence that is coming up for renewal in the next 12 months, get in touch with Mitesh, let him review it. And more, if you are a portfolio landlord, ping over a property schedule. Let's book in a call. Let's review those portfolios to make sure that you are on the right deals. The properties are still making money in the right manner in terms of interest rates, and see if there's any quick wins. Because we've got our finger on the pulse, we're getting updates from lenders every week, if not every day at the moment. Let us see if we can save you money and make you more money for the longer term. Thank you, Mitesh. Jazz, thank you so much for your time. I really, really appreciate it. in your lunch hour if you get one in this business. I certainly don't, but hey. So thank you so much. Anything else you want to say, Jazz?
No, thank you for having me. It's been great with you both. Yeah, it's been great.
Perfect. Thank you so much for joining us. As I said, if anybody's got any questions, feel free to email Mitesh, Jazz, or myself directly. The emails are on your screens. If anybody has any questions, you can direct message us on all the social media handles at our mortgage broker. And we look forward to hosting another video very, very soon. But otherwise, enjoy the rest of your Tuesday and your lunch hour. And we look forward to working with you very soon. All the best. Thank you.